15-minute range. Like, just think about it differently. Like, we're not just buying. We're not just getting long just because we broke above the 15-minute candle, right? Like, it's not just simply, okay, we've broken above the 15-minute candle. Now it's time to get long. It's not that simple. Trading, obviously, there's got to be some type of, like, you know, thought process more than just going, hey, oh my God, we just broke above the high. It's time to get long. Because look, you got dumped on. Well, that's pretty much simply looking at this from a very kind of bigger perspective than just simply buying because we broke above the high of a 15-minute candle. I want to see this. Like, this is my setup. This is not my setup. This is not a breakout setup. Right? Like, this is not the breakout. We want more consolidation. This is the 1-minute chart we're looking at right now. If you look at the 3-minute chart, you probably see it even nicer. You know, I would say on the 1-minute chart, like, look at the 3-minute chart difference, right? Like, you on the 3-minute chart, you want a minimum of 3 candles kind of hitting that trend line for the breakout. And there we go. Like, look right now, the ES still wanting more. You want a minimum of 3 candles hitting that trend line. This was actually 5 candles pretty much. But if we go to the 1-minute chart, like, I want on the 1-minute chart, I'd say like 5 candles minimum for a breakout. Got to hit that trend line, consolidate. Right here on the NASDAQ, up there, the ES, man. See, this is definitely like, this is even better of a bull flag than that one earlier. Look at the difference, right? Like, look at my line difference. We're consolidating there at the 92s. We get the breakout. There's a difference between like this one. It's more of like this. Like, that's a different setup, right? You see the difference? The ES up there to the 95s now. This is a different setup. I want you guys to see the difference between this setup here, right? This is like a bearish setup. We're below the VWAP here. We can't get above that high. We're thinking we're going to break to the downside. This setup, hey, look, we're holding here at the 92s. We break out. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate it, people. I think it makes sense. This is not what we want to see. It's not the breakup setup we want. We want this one. You know, we want this one, or even like this one here. The 84s up there to 89s. I mean, I think really you got to be, I wouldn't say happy with profits, but on the ES, I think a very consistent, profitable target for the ES is like 5 to 6 points. Like 5 to 6 points is like very kind of consistent. If you go for 10 points, you go for 20 points, sure, you're going to get those big winners, but they're not going to be as consistent. Like, you're consistently, it's much easier to get 5 to 6 points on the ES than it is to get fucking 20 points. You know? So here from the 85s, we pushed up there 89s. Wasn't perfect, but you're still pretty much like, you know, you could have had your stop here. If you're, let's say you're long off the 85s, you're risking like 2 to 3 for that 6-point move. Obviously, we would love to get 10 points, you know, from 84s up there to the 94s. There's 10 points right there. But also look at the difference. Like, you can hold through this, like green, 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 and kind of just trail this up and get that move. We saw on the book map as well, that 95 area sitting up there. So it's really just an idea, right? You want to be thinking differently than just like every setup, every strategy. You got to think. You can't just be like, okay, it's breaking out. It's breaking out. It's time to do it. Like, you got to have a little bit of brain power, my friends. You got to like use your thinking cap. Trading is not just simply draw a line and go, okay, get long. Like, it's like, oh, well, you know, let's be a little bit more, let's use our brains just a little bit. Especially things like this. You know, if you're looking, let's say you're looking at the ES for a breakout. One thing I always like to make sure is I definitely don't want to be breaking out, you know, like right into a fucking pivot point. Like, we have this pivot point right here at this, remember the 78 pivot point? Let's get rid of that indicator for a second. We don't want to just be breaking out straight into a pivot point. Like this move right here, same thing. Like, what's the more realistic idea? Like, it's probably a more realistic idea that we're gonna get stuck here and pull back. So really, you're like, why not just be patient and wait for this breakout over that pivot point? Turn that pivot point into support, like through here. Then it's like, oh, okay. But you really want to be careful just simply getting long at a level. If you don't know where those pivot points are at, you got to be looking at these pivot points, my friends. These pivot points love to act as resistance, support, vice versa. You don't want to short into a pivot. You don't want to get fucking long into a pivot. You know? I mean, the ES is, the NASDAQ, the ES is pretty much the same exact shit, man. Same exact shit, you know, to be honest. Like, you don't need to fucking, same thing here. Like, we had that pivot point right there at the 133s. Okay, like, do you really want to get long? You know, like right here, do you want to get long at fucking 125? Like, is that where you want to get long at right there? If you got long right here, well, that's not a good idea. Got the VWAP, that gap fill right there. That's not a bad setup to kind of try to get that push up. If we could hold there at the VWAP. It's more so like, it's just like very common sense reasoning. Like, you want to reason with your trades. I think that's the best way to think about it. Like, you're thinking from a very like reasonable standpoint. Like, if I know there's a fucking pivot point right there, like I sure as hell don't want to get long right there. But if I see that, hey, look, the VWAP's right here at the hundreds, we got that key level, like hundreds, 200, any like key level to be thinking about. Levels, thinking about these levels. Look, we held 100, we got that breakout. We pushed above the pivot, we turned the pivot into support. Up there to the 200s now. I mean, that's a 100-point move here on the NASDAQ, my friends. Right now on the ES, if you're trading the ES, make sure you pull up the SPY chart. I have the SPY chart always pulled up because you can see, you know, the SPY earlier, we were above the VWAP while we were not above the VWAP on the ES. Then we have that pivot point right there as well. You can see pivot point, getting stuck. Like I said, we get the pivot point break, and there's that beautiful move. It got tight, and then all the way up there to 446 now. So it's really just a battle of just like asking yourself, you know? Asking yourself, like, hey, should I be buying with that resistance, you know, right there? Should I be patient, just wait for something? I think the best thing to do is just kind of like wait for a setup where you just like, you have to get in. You're like, oh, well, this obviously like wants to go higher. Like, it obviously wants to go higher. If you got a question, if your question is it going to go higher? Is it going to go down or up? Maybe just fucking until it's like you see a move, you're like, well, this obviously is going to go up. Right now, the SPY, a little push up there to the 447s, that pivot point right there at the 447. She's still going. We got that breakout on the ES now. And you can see that breakout there on the ES from the 93s up there to the 96s. The thing to think about, though, is like we always say, you know, basically we have what? The breakout over the VWAP kind of being this like good setup right here. We had this kind of setup. Now we're going into the third move. Then we're going to be going into the fourth move. You know, at some point, it's like, hey, VWAP's down there. Let's be careful. Let's not go crazy here, people. I would say 500 on the book map is sitting up there right now. There's 305 contracts at the 500s right now. So don't go chasing waterfalls. Listen to the rhythm in the place that you used to.